Welcome to another edition of The Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. And for the past year, I've been teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Today's guest is Dr. Michael Lenox, author of Strategy in the Digital Age. Mike, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mark, for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us today. And as I mentioned, I so enjoyed your book and agree with so much of what you wrote, especially about cryptocurrencies. So let's start off by you giving us a little bit of background about yourself. So tell us about your professional background and how you ended up where you are.
Yeah, I have a background actually in systems engineering, and it's fun to point out to people that as AI has become such a hot topic of late, that it isn't a new thing. Even going back to the dark ages when I was in school, we were actually learning some of the AI techniques like neural networks and machine learning. What's really changed is the amount of data and the amount of processing power we have today. In addition to my systems engineering background, I spent some time in technology consulting and then went back and got my PhD at MIT in technology management and policy. And basically, I've been spending the last 20 plus years teaching in business schools, teaching primarily business strategy, but with a particular focus on technology and innovation. And then also an interest in the intersection between those and public policy issues. So this topic of the digital age has been one that has interested me for a long time, and I was very excited to get the opportunity to write a book about it.
Yeah, and it was a good book and one that's easily read by non-technologists like myself who really do love talking about it. So why did you write this book?
Yeah, this book actually is based on a course that I've taught for about 6 or 7 years of the same name. So Strategy in the Digital Age is a second-year MBA elective I've taught. So in many ways, it was my efforts to kind of collect my thinking and bring together some writings that I appreciated from others in a format that is helpful at one level to MBA students, but more probably succinctly for executives, and specifically those who might be going through some type of digital transformation. And one of the things I always say is that in my experience working with executives and others, I have yet to find an industry or a firm that's not feeling the pressures of digital transformation, or as I like to call it, its evil twin, digital disruption. And so many ways, this book was for those executives leading their organizations through these arguably somewhat turbulent times as we face constantly evolving technology.
So what's your definition of digital technology?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm not going to give you a succinct answer to this. I think at the heart of what we're talking about in our digital age is that we have digitized a lot of different artifacts that is creating massive amounts of data. So we all know, of course, of our mobile devices, our laptops and the like, but increasingly through the Internet of Things and the like, we are embedding more and more physical products and services with digital technologies that, again, at the end of the day, are collecting data. I think this becomes important because what's happening, of course, is now we're seeing the application of AI, machine learning, basically advanced predictive analytics, leveraging this data to do some things that we haven't been able to do in the past. So when I use the term digital and the digital age, I'm really talking about that broader set of trends. We're not just talking, Silicon Valley-based tech companies like Google and Amazon, though Amazon not based there in the Bay Area. Yet, they are at the heart of a lot of this. There's a lot more going on in a wide swath of the marketplace and across different industries.
In the beginning of the book, you talk about Kodak, one of the most iconic brands, going bankrupt. How did digital transformation, which they should have been one of the leaders, change their future, and what can we learn from that?
Yeah, I like the Kodak example, though it's obviously getting a little dated at this point, is simply because a lot of people might assume this is the simplest digital disruption story. They make film, the world goes to digital imaging, they go bankrupt. But as early as the late 1970s, they saw the potential of digital imaging. They had some of the first patents. They spent billions of dollars in R&D. And yet, despite decades of effort, they still failed. they still failed to make this transition. And I think in Kodak's case, there's a number of things that worked against them. One was their legacy capabilities in film. They had a lot of PhDs in chemistry and chemical engineering there that were not going to find much of a future in a digitally engaged world. And they also misjudged how the nature of consumption would fundamentally change as we move to digitization. So they even as late as 2008, were still assuming that we were going to print out all these digital images that we were creating, not really foreseeing the rise of social media and just the complete change in the way we consume and create value with images these days.
And Kodak wasn't the only company to miss taking advantage of digital technology, and heavyweights such as Blockbuster, Borders, Nokia, Sears, BlackBerry, as you mentioned all these in your book, and they attracted then hired the best and brightest. What happened with these folks? Because you wonder, I taught the Wharton School. You have all these kind of people from Wharton, Harvard, MIT, where you went to, and still they're in the junk pile of failed companies.
Yeah, I think change is hard. The idea that what made you successful in the past might not be what is needed in the future. We know from what we have studied of technology transitions that often those open up opportunities for especially new entrepreneurial entrants to come in and take over markets. When it comes to entrepreneurs, what I always point out is that what they have often in their advantage are two things. One, they don't have the baggage. They don't have any of the legacy baggage that established companies have. And the second thing is that I don't think is fully appreciated is they have numbers. So we all remember, of course, the Facebooks and the other successful ventures. We sometimes fail to remember the literally hundreds of others who make an effort in some new emerging space who ultimately fail. And so in some ways, it's a numbers game when we have these transitions, when we have these new opportunities where we see lots of different companies trying to make a go of it. Most of them will fail, but all it takes is a couple intrepid entrepreneurs to kind of fully disrupt an industry. And again, it's not that incumbent firms are going to necessarily fail, but history is littered with many once successful businesses that found it very hard to make these transformations.
Do you think some of it's based on the fact that it's short-term thinking? In Kodak's case, they're looking at giving up a very lucrative business where it's like 95 even net profit, right? I mean, it's just like insane amount of money. And since these people aren't being paid for the long term in the US, everything is short term. And they're saying, damn, the margins are so great. That's why do we want to rub out our margins? And Blockbuster had such a big investment in real estate. And so, you can go on down the line. BlackBerry probably thought there's no way, because I remember all of us had Blackberries, but you kept wondering, when are they going to make the screen bigger? And, this assumption that, look, we're already having fat margins now. Let's just ride it as long as we can. How much does that actually play into the thinking, especially you teach in a business school like I do?
Yeah, well, look, with BlackBerry, I just was going to highlight you. If you might remember when the iPhone came out, they were just like could not believe that people would use a screen to type things in. Of course, you had to have the tactile, touchpad to be able to make a successful smartphone. Look, I think there's a lot of different pathologies that incumbent companies face in the face of technology shifts and disruption. You named a number of those there, cannibalizing existing sales, right? You think about how, again, some of these intrepid entrepreneurs and startups, they can sometimes go, in the case of like an Amazon, decades before they actually are being required by the market to show profitability. For well-established companies, they don't have that luxury. And so there's even a number of just, managerial challenges. How do you incentivize people who've maybe had success in one area to now invest and develop new capabilities? I think at the heart of it, we talk in our core strategy courses about the strategist challenge. The idea very simply is that valuable competitive positions emerge first from your mission and vision as an enterprise. That's obviously core to who you are. The opportunities the market provides, which includes what's happening with technology. It also includes what your competitors are doing. And then your core capabilities that you have as an organization. And so what you're looking for is where these three things come together. And what the digital age has, I guess, foisted onto a lot of different companies here is that the opportunity side is shifting away from where maybe it has historically has been. And so the challenge is that you need to evolve your capabilities. And I use the term evolve very pointedly here, because what I have not observed is I have not seen any established companies just throw everything they've done in the past out the window and invent themselves anew. And so the question becomes, how can you evolve to a new position? So take Blockbuster again. Again, they had a very well established bricks and mortar experience, operations, and the like. Those were not going to translate well into a streaming world. What I worry about with a lot of companies is recognizing some of these disruptions. They strive for positions that might not be realistic for them to achieve. I run to a lot of companies who say things like, "We want to be the Google of X." And my
Yeah.
reaction more often than not to them is, Google's going to be the Google of X, actually. They're very well positioned to do exactly what you're talking about here. You kind of need to go back to the drawing board and rethink, what can you specifically do well, and that you can, again, evolve these capabilities to meet the evolving market needs. That's a really hard question for especially, well-established, successful businesses to grapple with in a changing marketplace.
Yeah, no question about that. That's going to be one of the big challenges for these companies. 70% of the companies in existence today will shudder in the next 10 years, as you mentioned in the book. Anonymous, what are these companies missing?
Well, again, I think it's all these pathologies that make it hard for established companies to transform. One of the things that I emphasize in the book, and again, the book is meant to be very prescriptive and give a set of tools to executives and strategists within companies to try to figure out this challenge that I just outlaid. And so one of them that I share is what I call the digital transformation stack. And so imagine 4 layers to the stack here. You have your digital infrastructure. This could be everything from moving to cloud computing, establishing a data lake, all these things that a lot of digital transformation efforts embrace. The next layer on the stack is your data and analytics. So this is that set of skills that you have to be able to take all this data that you are collecting and turn it into value-added services, value-added products, and the like. The third layer in the stack are your digital applications. And this is really where the rubber hits the road. This might be everything from a consumer-facing application. It could be a back-end operational piece of technology. This is where you're really implementing your digital work. And then the top layer, not surprising as a business strategist, is your digital strategy. What I find a lot of companies get wrong is they actually start at the bottom of the stack. They start with, where do we need to invest our IT dollars? Do we need to go cloud? All of those kind of infrastructure issues before they've even thought about the top level piece. What is our strategy? Where are we trying to go? What position are we trying to establish? So I like this analogy that a lot of digital transformation efforts are like trying to improve the efficiency of the engines on the Titanic. At the end of the day, all you're going to do is hit the iceberg maybe quicker or more efficiently. So you need to think about where you're steering the ship as you try to build out these digital capabilities in the organization.
The first taxi was invented in 1897. I researched this. And for 112 years, they dominated big cities as an alternative to driving. In 2009, Uber was born, and that changed everything literally overnight for these guys. The taxi industry had to be reading about this. Why were they, and really still are, late in the digital party?
Well, I love the example of Uber as a digital disruption because it highlights, I think, one of the fundamental challenges that companies are facing. If you think about what Uber is at the end of the day, it is a piece of software sitting on your mobile phone. They did not put a whole bunch of infrastructure investment into doing cabs themselves or putting in depots to service them. They created what we call a two-sided market. They connected drivers with riders, and they did so, again, with a piece of software. That type of disruption, what I would call business model disruption, is occurring across a wide number of industries. There's the line that software eats hardware for lunch. I think that also is
Yes, in
something
your
we're
book.
seeing
Yep.
here that, and I'm definitely taking that from others. And it's this idea, though, that at the end of the day, as we digitize, software becomes the key attribute for providing competitive advantage. And these historic advantages in the hardware side become less and less valuable. We've seen this in consumer electronics. We've seen this in a variety of ways in which hardware becomes commoditized, and it's really the software that creates the value. So again, for some of these companies who have built their success on building out physical infrastructure, they suddenly are finding themselves disrupted by players that are just have a completely different way of approaching the problems that they address. Think of financial services, what's happened with fintech and fintech innovators. They're often picking apart different pieces of the value chain, typically digitally enabled doing so. Very different than a traditional brick and mortar, commercial bank that has to build out stores and a whole bunch of infrastructure. We're seeing this across a lot of different industries where digitization is opening up the opportunities for these kind of unique targeted disruptions coming in.
I was always amazed that the newspaper industry totally missed the revolution of the Kindle. I remember having breakfast with the publisher of the Inquirer after he had bought it for like $550 million. And I said, have you ever used the Kindle before? And he knew about the Kindle, but he hadn't been using it. I said, if you use the Kindle, you're never going to go back to paper. I said, you could get rid of your printing presses and give everybody a free Kindle, work it out with Amazon because it was so early on. And they had the larger Kindles, like almost like reading a newspaper. I said, and tell people they don't even have to get out of their bed to get the paper. It'll be zapped to them every morning. And he goes, yeah, I just don't think that's going to happen. I think that's more like a fad that people still like holding the newspaper. I said, believe me, I said, I bought this Kindle and I always used to carry 3 books with me every time I travel because I'm an avid reader. So I was afraid of running out.